If you're new to the channel, then just a bit of context. I've been ticking off all the Resident Evil titles I never got around to playing, and well, that's all in the past, as now we're marching onwards to May 7th and the release of Resident Evil Village by revisiting all the mainline entries in the series. Now this is the first review of a game that I've previously played, and what a game to start with. Resident Evil Remake. Let's dive in. Resident Evil Remake released on the Nintendo GameCube in Japan on the 22nd of March 2002, marking 6 years to the date since the original game graced us on the PS1. Both games are directed by Resident Evil legend Shinji Mikami, who had the rare opportunity most directors don't get, to go back and see his vision fulfilled with new hardware. Now, not meaning to date myself too much here, but just to give some much needed background on my experience. Now, I played this originally in 2004, having never owned a GameCube. Me and a friend rented it from Blockbuster at the tender age of 14 and sat down for a weekend to grind out the game, having been a massive fan of the original trilogy. We must have played it through at least 7 times over that rental period, and it immediately planted itself as my favourite entry in the series. Now, it's been 17 years since I last played the game. The questions I hope to answer through this review are: does it still hold up playing through a modern lens? Is it worth playing in 2021? And does it still keep its position at the top of my internal tier list? Now, as usual, I've split this review into plot, gameplay and presentation. Now, to put a warning out there, I will be going through some spoilers, so if you haven't played the game before and don't want to know what happens, come back to the video after playing it. You won't regret it. It's the 24th of July 1998. A series of bizarre murders on the outskirts of Raccoon City lead Special Tactics and Rescue Service Bravo team to investigate. But when radio contact is lost, it's time to call in the big guns. Alpha team is sent in and quickly find the site of the downed helicopter. Upon inspecting the wreck, they're attacked by a pack of dogs which have definitely seen better days. Peter would have a field day. Running to safety, the survivors escape to a distant mansion to find some solace. Little do they know, they've walked into an even bigger nightmare. Now, choosing either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, you decide to investigate what is happening in this mansion, who is responsible for the undead that walk the halls, and why your teammates are acting so suspiciously. What's interesting is, depending on who you choose, the story plays out quite differently. The main points are the same, but there are some big differences to the fates of key characters. As Jill, you're searching for Chris, and this is mirrored if playing as the other. What makes the difference is who you're joined with on your investigation. Jill is aided by Barry, the biggest of balls Burton, who comes in like the Kool-Aid man to save you from certain death with his massive gun. Chris gets the aid of Bravo Team's own Rebecca Chambers, the newbie to the squad, who, following the events of RE0, should be the most experienced member of the team, but obviously she must have amnesia, as she can't help but fall over when she first encounters a hunter. Now, as the team medic, she offers her assistance with keeping Chris healthy at certain safe rooms throughout the complex, and is also needed for a number of puzzles. It's in the cutscenes and interactions with the partner characters that things change quite wildly. Let's look at 2 examples here, Richard and Wesker. Poor Richard. No matter who you're playing as, he's getting murked. But it's how he goes out that changes. As Jill, if you manage to give him the antidote, he jumps in front of Yawn and sacrifices himself for you. But as Chris, for some reason, he decided to go visit the Aqua Ring and becomes fish food. With Wesker, after giving the mandatory Resident Evil bad guy monologue, gets stabbed and apparently killed by Tyrant in Chris's campaign, whereas in Jill's, he gets a pimp slap and escapes to live another day. These are just 2 of multiple changes that permeate across the game, but somehow both of these characters' stories are classed as canon. Now, I'm not the master of Resident Evil lore, but that doesn't really make much sense. If you let the inconsistencies go and take each story for what they are, it's the blueprint for Resident Evil here on out, and on face value, you'd think it's an average plot, but where it excels is in the environmental and subsidiary storytelling. Across the environment, you find files which seek to either aid in puzzles or add some backstory to key characters and events which have left the mansion in the state it's in. Remake not only has the most memorable file in all the series, it also tells the tale of Lisa Trevor, who in my mind is the most heartbreaking character in all of Resident Evil. Learning how she's been imprisoned in this complex, endlessly searching for her mother's remains, all the while continually experimented on, is a real gut punch. The amount of story that is told in these file pickups is insane. It grows the world without needing long cutscenes or reams of narration. It leaves your mind to fill in the blanks, and combined with the ambient music, it really is effective in dragging you into this world and keeping you there long after the credits roll. Exactly the same as its 1996 counterpart, Remake uses tank controls and a fixed camera perspective. Now I've stated this many times before, so forgive me, but I'll keep beating this drum. This is the best formula for Resident Evil. Every camera change brings a sense of dread. Combined with the unique sounds of enemies and the limited field of view, it forces you to slow down, to soak in the atmosphere, to feel fear. It's a simple recipe. Put unnecessary strain on the player to fight with their movement while hiding the approaching threat. It worked then, and it works today. Now the remake does include a more modern control scheme under alt controls, for those that want that. Now I did try it, and as the saying goes, once you go tank, you're not going back. Now in terms of bringing it back to what the series is known for, Remake's gameplay is mostly puzzle orientated. They feature much more throughout than in any other Resident Evil title. And to me, they strike that perfect balance where it makes you pause, browse back through the files and survey your environment before coming across the answer. None of them are obtuse, but for me, I still felt like a genius solving them, even if the answer is literally given to you, if you look hard enough. When Capcom sat down to remake Resident Evil 1, they didn't simply think a fresh coat of paint would do the job and shit it out. They took the time to think about how the game could be improved, to add an extra layer of challenge, to create choice for the player without having to fundamentally reinvent what made the original so special. The inclusion of Crimson Head zombies is absolutely genius, and testament to their ambition with this title. Killing enemies in Resident Evil is always a choice. Do I conserve ammunition, but leave the threat of an enemy in the area, which I'll inevitably have to revisit at some point down the line? When you kill a zombie, normally you'd expect them to stay dead. Well, in Remake, unless you decapitate them or burn them, they'll come back. Quicker, stronger, and much more ferocious than before. Now outside of wasting shotgun rounds to get an easy decapitate, or getting ridiculously lucky with a handgun shot, you'll need to carry a lighter and fuel canteen. Now the fuel is limited. You can carry 2 uses at any one time before you need to find a place to refill it. There's plenty of it dotted around the mansion, but it's the choice of sacrificing your precious space to take those items with you that causes that extra level of anxiety. Item management and figuring out what to go out into the unknown with is the best way to create a sense of uneasiness in the player. So by doubling down on this with another set of items on top of the heals, ammo, guns and key items, is perfection. When you're deep into an area, a trek away from an item box, and you have a host of enemies in front of you, do you take the choice of killing them, use your ammo, and then potentially make things way trickier when you come back through here in the future, as you didn't take your fuel canteen with you? Handing the player choice is always the best solution, and here in Remake, you have so many minute-to-minute interactions which could end up bringing your own downfall. It's game design at its best. Now in terms of space, this is probably a good time to talk about the differences between Jill and Chris, which further help to make their campaigns feel unique from each other. Jill has 8 inventory slots and a lockpick. She has access to a heavier hitting arsenal with the grenade launcher, but less health. Chris can take more hits, swing the knife faster, and has access to the lighter at all times, but only has 6 slots. And due to him not being the master of unlocking, he needs to find old keys dotted around the mansion to open doors that Jill could simply open herself. This further eats up limited inventory space. The character differences combine with unique plot moments to reward players that decide to dive into the experience again with the second protagonist. The other big change to the gameplay is the inclusion of self-defense items. It's the first time they reared their head in a Resident Evil game, and their addition is life-saving. They don't fundamentally change how you approach situations, but it's a small bit of relief from what can be a punishing game. One hit from a zombie can put you into caution, and 2 hits normally cause the game over, so having a lifeline to fall back on when you really need it is enough to stave off any potential frustration. Now, that's not to say the systems here are perfect. The map in RE1 works well enough, showing a room has either been fully explored or not, but it doesn't show what you've left there. Nor does it give any indication which key unlocks which door. It also struck me how much I really missed the ability to discard items. Now, I don't mean in the RE0 sense of removing the item from my storage and placing it on the ground to collect later. I mean the scenario we've all faced. You enter a room and pick up a red herb. Then in that same room, you find the key item that you've searched for this whole time. And now you can't get rid of the red herb, forcing a lonely trek all the way back to the item box, cursing yourself all the way. Now, these are minor nitpicks, and the modern entries in 7, RE2 and RE3 remakes all move to alleviate these issues. But goddamn do I miss these quality of life changes in going back. To summarise this section, Resident Evil Remake blends its faithful camera angles, limited inventory space and frequent puzzles to ensure you traverse every square inch of the mansion. You know it intimately by the time the game wraps, and by including enemies that resurrect if not disposed of properly, it means those backtracks better be planned or you're in for a world of hurt. When deciding on which version of RE1 to cover on my channel, between the 1996 version and its 2002 remake, it really wasn't a contest. Remake excels head and shoulders above its original, if nothing else, solely for the inclusions and additive content included into the experience, which elevate it far and above Shinji Mikami's original outing. Now, if you haven't guessed so far, I've played this under the HD remaster, which was released in 2015 across PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One and PC. But what I'm going to cover now is true across all of its releases, regardless of the HD lick of paint. The use of fixed camera perspective meant they could put extra power into the pre-rendered backdrops, to push the detail to a level which we had never seen before on the GameCube or PS2. I can't explain just how exceptional this looked at the time compared to games releasing in 2002. The team used every resource they could to make every area feel unique, and most importantly, memorable. It's all aided and sells its surroundings by its use of lighting and sound design. For me, Remake has the best soundtrack out of the entire series. Every area has its own theme, be that just an atmospheric sound of the wind broken up by strikes of lightning, which always seem to catch me unaware, or the Aqua Ring theme, which sells its water-laden environment perfectly. The themes all elevate the areas they are tied to, and not a single one is a letdown, especially when you compare this to the director's cut of the original. Needless to say, it's a major improvement. Now, much like all my other reviews, I'm a sucker for a save theme, and in Remake it's no different. I don't think it's quite as good as Resident Evil 2's, but damn it's close. Creating that space where you feel you can unwind, plan the next step, and then force yourself back out into the unknown. For the HD remake, Capcom used their internal engine, the MT framework, to push lighting to new heights above its original release on GameCube, and it certainly succeeded here. The lit candlesticks and open flames give off a sense of warmth and flood the surrounding environment in realistic light. Shadows have a sense of depth, and this adds to selling the backgrounds and environments that you traverse. I found myself, even now in 2021, in awe of how good they look. It really took me back to how I felt playing it for the first time, back on the GameCube. That sense of wonder isn't easy to create, especially when you revisit something you remember so vividly. Now, the enemy design and bosses are iconic. It's not fair to compare these with the sequels that followed, as I have done with my previous reviews. These are designs that started the series off, and they are mainstays for the franchise to come. Zombies, hunters, tyrants, dogs, spiders and snakes are all what we know from Resident Evil, but there's one enemy that doesn't appear as often as I'd like them to: sharks. Now, I'm a sucker for them in video games, and to me, if you're going to experiment on all manner of creatures, the logical endpoint has got to be the shark. Dr. Evil had it right.
I have one simple request, and that is to have sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
Experimenting on sharks is a mad scientist idea, but for my money, whoever decided to test on them deserves a promotion, and his work continued. You just can't have too many sharks. Now, in every game there's always one enemy who's a real letdown, and for me that's the Chimera. They're introduced far too late, with seemingly no lore surrounding them outside of one slide actually naming them. They don't cause any real danger, and are solely there as an annoyance in the final 2 rooms. When the Chimera first appear, you're carrying nitroglycerin. Now, I'm just trying to avoid a scene out of vertical limit. I don't need some useless bugs getting in my way. With the remake, they decided it was time to redo the voice work. Now, objectively, this is one area that definitely needed attention. The original voiceover and script was horrendous. The issue is that it's so bad that it's just brilliant. How can you top lines like this?
Saved me!
Yeah.
That was close. Thanks, Barry.
Don't mention it. What a monster. I can't believe... What the hell is this place anyway?
The remake does a good job of fixing the mistakes of the past, but it does take away from the charm the original had. The stilted B-movie delivery of the voice work is truly iconic, and it seems ridiculous to miss this, but I really do. I wish I could toggle it back on to experience just how funny the first outing is, but with better animations. It would be hilarious, even if it is just a throwback for those who want it. Now, in terms of performances, nothing really stand out, but nothing horrendous either. It's good enough, and I suppose that's all you really need given how outlandish the entire game's plot is. Revisiting Resident Evil Remake 17 years since I last played it has been an absolute joy. The improvements to gameplay, visuals and art design says it leagues above its original outing, all the while keeping it true to the original vision. It's the perfect remake, and for me, still sits head and shoulders above the other entries in the series. The sheer number of puzzles across the entire complex constantly force you to retread old ground, all the while putting you in harm's way from enemies you've previously killed or left alive. It takes everything that was great about the original, modernised it, while adding loads of additional content. The map and item management show its age, and this is certainly something which takes some getting used to. But for me, it's the quintessential survivor horror experience. And if for some reason you haven't played it before, go and do it. You won't regret it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, put a like on it, let me know your thoughts on the game in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more Resident Evil content. The next entry will be Resident Evil 2 Remake, before we then dive headfirst into the PS1 version of Resident Evil 3. I do hope to see you then. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.